Thank, thank you for this great time that you are having. Father, we call upon your Holy Spirit to come and take control as we are going to have our lesson. May we contribute and may we understand whatever is going to be said in the lesson. In Jesus' name I've prayed and believed. Amen.
BS, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon, Madam.
I said my name is Bidabwa Silverine Wereka. I probably will change the
Good afternoon, Madam.
initials sometime, but this is Bidabwa Silverine Wereka. So I'll be handling the lesson. I'm glad. I don't know if the previous speaker was a teacher or a student. I also don't know about that. But thank you for that. A student, okay. So thank you for taking us through a recap of what exactly transpired in the previous lesson. I'll be standing in today for Teacher Crescent. And as she really brought us
Mr. Silverlin, please unmute. I've just disabled some settings.
So you talked about sexual reproduction and why it is important for organisms to reproduce. We all know that if you're looking at the life processes, organisms must be able to reproduce, because when they reproduce, that is when they're able to increase in number. But at the same time, it also ensures that the organisms of a particular species do not become extinct. I hope we've heard of that word, extinction. You find probably that a particular, maybe I can say animal, existed sometime, but over time the number reduces. And when the number reduces, that means chances are that in many years later, people may not know that that animal ever existed. And that is when we talk about extinction. So one of the ways that organisms avoid being extinct is by being in position to reproduce. I think we've heard of what they call the rhinos in Uganda. Their number is reducing, and maybe with many years later, if they're not well protected and encouraged to get the conditions required for reproduction, maybe many years later we'll not have any rhinos, but people are working to make sure that they are able to continue existing. So I was noting that it is important for organisms to reproduce such that they don't become extinct and also increase in number. And we mainly have two types of reproduction, that is sexual reproduction, and then later on, asexual. According to the teacher, he told me that you are discussing asexual reproduction, especially in the plants. Can one of you remind us, what do you remember with the term that is vegetative propagation? Anyone who remembers what vegetative propagation means? You can raise your hand, then I'll be able to allow you unmute, then you can respond. Any one of us remembers what vegetative reproduction is about, or vegetative propagation? Okay, Itel. I can see someone who is named Itel. Please unmute and respond to that question. Okay, Kenneth?
Vegetative propagation means produce plant.
I don't know if we lost you, Kenneth. Come again.
Are you getting me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Are you getting me?
Yes, I am.
Vegetative propagation. It means producing new plants from structures like stems, leaves, or roots without using spores or seeds.
So if we use any part of the plant in order to get new plants, then we can talk about vegetative propagation. As long as the new plant that you have got has not developed from a seed, then that is a form of vegetative propagation. And I am sure you talked about different structures that are used for vegetative propagation in the previous lesson. We can use the stem, as he mentioned. We can use the leaves. We can use the roots. Now, maybe can someone tell us what is special about those structures that are used for vegetative propagation? What must they have if they are to be used for vegetative propagation? Yes, Mark? Mark, are you there? My question is, what should the structures have if they are to be used for vegetative propagation? What are the special structures that they have in order for us to say that these ones are suitable for vegetative propagation?
Teacher Silverline in the chat. Carol says they should have buds. Then Charlene, they should have buds. Dora Blessing.
She's also noting that they should have buds. That is very beautiful.
Yes.
Because it is the buds that will grow into a new plant. And usually they should also be able to store some food, because as this new plant is growing, it is not yet capable of making its own food. So it depends on the food that was previously stored by the would-be parent plant. And I'm sure you talked about the structure that I'm sharing on the screen there. Can one of you remind us that first structure? What is it called? And what is special about it? Julia? Okay, I'm talking about this structure here. The very first picture.
It's Jinga.
What type of stem is it? If we are looking at stem types, what type of stem is it?
It's a rhizome.
It's a rhizome. Thank you very much. So this stem here, when you look at it, you must have noted that it is swollen. And because it is swollen, that means it is storing food. Like I mentioned earlier, the plant which is growing is not capable of making its own food in the first period of growth. So it needs to depend on what is already stored. So apart from the buds, these structures usually have ways of storing food, either the stem, either the leaves of something. If you look at the last picture, and one of you remind us, where is the food stored? In the last picture here, where is the food stored?
From the chat, Deborah says in the leaves, as well as Imelda and Rhea.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure you talked about this leaf. It is a leaf that we call Bryophyllum. The plant is called Bryophyllum. It has leaves that are usually thick. The lamina is thick or it is swollen. And the reason it is to make sure that it stores food. Then on the sides here, that is where we see the buds. And those buds are the ones that will grow into a new plant. So that was basically reminding ourselves of some of the things that you talked about in the previous lesson. And we are expected to continue. Ruth, you said which question did you not respond to?
Part G.
Part G.
Part of the previous slide, yes.
This particular slide?
No,
Okay.
the previous one.
Previous one. Oh, mention other types of plant vegetative structures. Okay. So the first picture here, you should have identified it as a rhizome. The second one is Irish potato, but if we are looking at the type of stem, that is a stem tuber. It is also swollen, and it has those buds that can grow into a new plant. Then down here, we have the Bryophyllum leaf, and that leaf is the one that has got buds, and then they're used for vegetative propagation. So part M here says, mention other types of plant vegetative structures. And for each, mention the adaptations it has for vegetative propagation, and mention and make well-labeled drawings. I'm sure you talked about how we make drawings in biology. Now, given that this was an assignment that was supposed to research on, can I get some responses from you? Apart from the pictures we see, which other structures of plants can be used for vegetative propagation?
Okay, from the chat, Nancy has already sent. She says, root tubers, they are swollen for storage of food. And an example is sweet potatoes. Then Bree says stem cuttings. Mark, please unmute and contribute. Mark, we cannot hear you. Okay, Mark, your network is not stable. I request you type your answer in the chat.
And an example is the oxalis. An example is what you call the ox, and one of the adaptation of it is that.
I don't know if teacher you got Mark.
Either.
Okay, so you can send his answer in the chat. In the chat, Rhea says suckers for bananas, Jordan stem cuttings, London suckers and runners.
So we have those questions there too. Of course, they will take us through that particular question later on that we have discussed as well. But please take note of our questions. Number one says, what is the difference between natural and artificial methods of vegetative propagation? Then question two says, discuss the various forms of natural means of vegetative propagation, and then artificial means of vegetative propagation. Now, I heard some people say stem cuttings. Now, just like you hear the word stem cuttings, that means man has been involved somehow, because you have to get the stem and cut it, then plant it. So that should be one of the forms of artificial means of vegetative propagation. Then the natural ones, you're actually not participating as man. Even if you did not go to the field, the plants will grow from maybe the rhizome, maybe a bulb, or something like that without your interference. So we have natural forms, and then we have artificial forms of vegetative propagation. I said when we probably look at our next slides, they will help us to answer the next question, the previous question that you had to look at. So we have some of the pictures there.
Teacher Silverlin,
Yes, please.
I'll kindly requesting maybe you drag this other panel that has outline and slides so that this main slide is clear, because there's some people who are using phones, and for example, Kenneth is saying he cannot see, is requesting you adjust.
That I drag, I didn't get your first statement.
Maybe you, I don't know, maybe you drag, you come to this other part, this other panel where you see outline and slides this side. Then you stop your cursor at that boundary. Okay, first exit writing, that pencil, and go back to mouse.
So you want me to use outline?
No. Go back to slides. Then come here to the boundary. This part here, that part. I don't know whether no. Okay, let me request remote control. Yes. I think that's better. Or you can actually play. Inside there is a button, like a icon that shows play, like how you'd play a video. So that the screen just basically shows that one. Down this side, down here. After click to add notes, this side to your right below, there is that red button of play. Yes, that one. Better. And proceed. So you just use the keyboard arrows to move back and forth. Back to you, teacher. Thank you.
So I hope we can see the pictures.
Yes.
We need to identify them as whatever we are seeing on the screen. Is it artificial vegetative structures, or are they natural vegetative structures?
Okay, from the chat, Imelda Ben says the natural ones we have are sweet potato veins. I think she meant vines. And then Galaxy, someone using Galaxy Note 10 Plus says crafting, cutting, layering, marketing are artificial propagation. So Treasure saying they are natural, even Imelda, natural, and Shiba as well.
So the structures that we are looking at are structures that are used for vegetative propagation, and they are the natural structures. I said it is something that will need to, I don't know who is writing on the screen. Please endeavor not to. So the first picture here, what do we call this? Remember, you're supposed to even give adaptations.
Where was it? Please unmute and give us your answer.
I think that's a banana plantation.
It's a banana plantation. Vegetative structure. How do we call the vegetative structure used to propagate bananas? Mwebase, go ahead.
Mwebase, unmute again. Okay, she has failed to unmute.
Sucker.
So this is the one that someone talked about as a sucker. Usually you have a young
Lamek and London, please stop writing on the screen.
So when we look at this last statement here, I just wanted to get us to the notes where we have the suckers. You have a parent plant, but along that parent plant, you have a smaller one that is growing on the side. And I hope we're able to see that. So that is what we are calling the axillary bud that develops into a new plant. It usually has what we call the scale leaves. And those scale leaves are usually those brown leaves. I don't know how many of us have been to a banana plantation, but the brown, thin, they appear like a polythene bag. Those are the scale leaves, and they're supposed to protect the stem from desiccation. Maybe one of us can tell us the meaning of desiccation. Any person giving us the meaning of desiccation? Because we ought to know what the terms mean. Okay, wilting from someone. Desiccation means something that is drying up. So it can dry out because of losing too much water. So that is the sucker, and we are having examples here of plants that can be propagated using suckers. We have pineapples, banana, and then saiso. I am seeing Charity putting up the hand. I don't know if that's a question from Charity.
Teacher.
Yes, please.
I was just asking for the spelling of desiccation.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
And you didn't see the word?
Oh, I've seen it. Thank you.
That very last one there, that's the word desiccation. And like I said, it is supposed to prevent the plant from drying up. Then, of course, apart from the bud that develops into a new plant, the scale leaves, it also has what we call adventitious roots. I'm sure you must have talked about adventitious roots, which enable it to absorb water from the soil. Of course, not water only, together with the dissolved mineral salts, because the growing plant will need them. I'll be going back and forth. So we have a second picture here. Ruth, are you still there such that we can get to know anyone writing? What is the second picture about? Which structure is that?
I'm still on from the chat. Let me see. Anisha is saying it's a yam.
Hmm?
JB, it's a cocoyam. Okay. Most of them are saying it's a yam. Or
Yam.
they are yams. Mm.
They are yams. Now, like I said, these are, of course, they are actual plants that we have seen, and therefore we are giving them their real names. But I'm hoping you know that when we are in biology, sometimes we don't want the actual name, but I want the name of the structure. How do we identify it? Like the first one, we said it is a sucker. So the second one and the one below it, if you don't call them yams, how should they be called? Because
From
I'm
the
sure you
chat,
know we have different types of yams.
from the chat, Charlene says it's a white yam and becomes a stem tuber.
It's a
Then
white
Dora,
yam.
stem tubers. And Joel is still saying a stem tubers. Ravin, your hand is up.
I think it's a comb.
Thank you very much. It is a comb. So how do we write the word comb?
Ravin, spell.
CORM.
CORM. Now, what is special about the comb? Remember, we're supposed to give examples of vegetative structures, and then, apart from mentioning the vegetative structure, we give the adaptation. The first structure that we've talked about is a sucker. The second one we are talking about is a comb. Now, from the comb, you'll give examples of the combs, like the people that I've mentioned. The cocoyam is an example of a comb. So what is special about this comb that enables it to be used for vegetative propagation? Julia, I see your hand up.
Yes. It has, first of all, soaring stem for storing food. Then I think it even has adventitious roots that help in the conduction of water to its maybe young ones. I think that's it. And even the birds that form new ones.
So if you
Yes.
actually note, the structures are going to be the same things that we'll be mentioning. It must have buds that will grow into a new plant. It must be somehow swollen in order to store the food. And then later on, some of them have scale leaves. For example, these brown things that we are seeing on the surface of this structure here, that is the scale leaf. Where my pointer is, that is supposed to be a scale leaf. Then if you observe the first one, there are thin-like structures that are getting off. And those thin-like structures are adventitious roots that are used for absorption of water. Can someone
And
give us
teacher, Teacher Silverlin,
Yes, please.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What makes a comb different from a sweet potato stem tuber in terms of its characteristics or adaptations?
You said sweet potato stem tuber.
Yes.
You said. Now, sweet potato doesn't have a stem tuber.
Mm.
Sweet potato has what we call root
Vines.
tubers. They are root tubers.
Tubers. Okay.
Then it is propagated using the vines. But itself, what we eat is called a root tuber.
Thank you. Had misfired.
Then the stem tubers, the examples of stem tubers are the Irish potatoes. I think
So
you can.
an Irish potato is just when in terms of natural vegetative propagation, we just leave it as a plain stem tuber. Not, well, how can I say it? And in stem tubers, does that mean that a comb is an example or a type or a kind of a stem tuber?
It is a type of stem. separate type of stem. Actually, these ones are usually called modified stems. And under modified stems, we have stem tubers, for example, Irish potato, suckers, for example, bananas, pomes, for example, cocoyam. We have bulbs, for example, onion.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. I was talking about the third diagram here that we see where the pointer is. I think it's one of those that we talked about before already, but maybe for emphasis, which structure is that? Which type of stem is it? And I hope we know that all these are, some of them are underground stems, like this particular one is an underground stem.
In that chat, Nancy is replying that it's a rhizome, Maria, a rhizome. Who Joel is also saying it's a rhizome, and the rest. Teacher, someone in the chat has a question. Is gladius a comb? An example of a comb?
Those are supposed to be examples of forms. Like when we talk about a rhizome, can someone give me examples of rhizomes? Apart from ginger, I'm sure I talked about ginger last time. So apart from ginger, do we have other examples of plants that we can group under rhizomes?
Jaden and mutant. If your answer. Jaden and mute.
Canna lily.
Thank you very much. We have the canna lily. Any other example?
In the chat, Paul says turmeric.
Turmeric.
Galaxy says coach grass. And then Tashovia, do you have any other?
I think bamboo as well.
So those are some of the rhizomes, but the features will be the same, that they're usually swollen in order to store food. They should have buds that grow into the new plant. They have scale leaves to protect the stem from drying up or desiccation. And then later on, they have adventitious roots, and the adventitious roots are supposed to absorb water. Can someone identify this picture here? Where my pointer is? Beetroot. Someone has said bulb. Coach grass. Not really. This one, I don't have any picture for coach grass here. Beetroot, which is supposed to be a root tuber. Now, maybe we can ask ourselves here. I think someone mentioned something. So what do we think is special about this structure here that ensures it can be used for vegetative propagation? What is special about beetroot such that we can use it for vegetative propagation the way it is here, and we use the roots, not necessarily the seeds?
Paul.
So someone here has said it has eyes. Please take note that when you're giving the biological answer, though some textbooks have used it that they have eyes, the would-be eyes are actually what we call the buds. So giving the biological statement, we should be saying it has got buds. And those buds are the ones that will grow into a new plant. If you look at it, it is swollen, so it stores food for the plant that will be growing. And if you plant it, it will start giving off those other smaller roots that we call adventitious roots in order for it to be able to absorb water. Now, there's this picture here. Anyone that can identify this? Water hyphen, okay. Yams. Now, like I said at the beginning, usually when you talk about yams, we have very many different types of yams, really. So yams is a very broad statement, and you need to be very specific before you talk about yams. My friend who has called it bryophyllum, it is not bryophyllum. Bryophyllum is this one in this corner where my pointer is right now. That is where we have the bryophyllum leaf. And I hope we can see the plantlets. We can see the roots that are coming off. So if this one comes into contact with soil, you expect it to grow into a new plant. I think one of you has given me the answer. That is rana. Rana is supposed to be a stem that is close to the soil surface, but it is not underground. It grows above, just like, I don't know how many of us have seen strawberry, just like the picture down. Actually, these two follow in the same category. But at the nodes there, that is where the roots are given off, the adventitious roots. So when the node comes into contact with the soil, it gives off adventitious roots and it continues to grow, just like the word is rana. It grows on the surface, moving forward, but not upright. I don't know how many of us have seen strawberry, seen the actual plant growing in the garden. Plantain, it's rana, please. Let's take note that that picture there is representing a rana, these two here. Can someone talk about this particular one here? What do we know about that diagram there? That picture where my cursor is now.
Teacher, I still have a question on the previous picture. What's the difference between a rana and a stolon?
That's a good one. A stone is underground. That means on the surface, I will not see the stem, but I'll see an aerial bit that is growing above the ground. But a rana, I should be able to see the stem on the ground, not underground. So ranas are not underground stems, while stones are supposed to be underground stems. But they grow in the same way. I think you have brought up the idea. All of them grow horizontally on the surface, but one is underground, and the other one is above the ground. So
can we have can we have strawberries that are propagated by stolons? Yes, then other types maybe of strawberries that are ranas. Or strawberries basically are purely ranas.
Now, like I said, a rana should be above the ground. And strawberries are usually ranas.
Okay, thank you.
Then stones are usually underground.
So teacher, in reply to your question about that picture,
Yeah.
Joiner Faith says that's a bulb. Imelda is calling them onions. Okay. Aitel says it has fibrous roots. Carol says they're bulbs. Salim calls them it's an onion, but under bulbs. William says sprinters. Then Rhea says it has fresh, freshly leaves. He has typed freshly leaves, though I think it's wrong. Freshly leaves and adventitious roots. And lastly, from Jadan, please unmute and give us your answer.
Onions and the bulbs. Onions and the bulbs.
And about, thank you very much. Usually it is important for us to identify them as giving them their biological identity. And the biological identity here, I'm looking at identifying it as a bulb. Now, when I ask for examples of bulbs, you can give me onions. Can I get any other example of a bulb apart from onions?
Salim? Okay, Robin?
We have the garlic.
So the other example is garlic. Ruth, you said, how did the person who wrote the word fleshy, how did they write it?
Freshly. They wrote fresh, then L-Y.
It is supposed to be F-L-E-S-H-Y, fleshy, meaning it is thick. Those of us that cook, I'm very sure that when you cut through the onion, you see those thick leaves. They are the ones that we refer to as the fleshy leaves. So onions actually store, or bulbs, store their food in those fleshy leaves. Then when you cut through, usually you see some green pointing structures when you cut through the onion in the middle. And that is what we call the buds that will grow into a new plant. And of course, the adventitious roots, because we said that adventitious roots are important, that the structure can absorb water from the soil.
Teacher, in the chat, someone is confusing.
Mm.
I remember they said up, most people, half of quarter of the people who are giving answers are saying it's beetroot. Then Matthias called it Irish. I don't know whether he was seeing something else.
The picture here, the purple one or red, where the pointer is, this structure is supposed to be beetroot. On the screen, the pictures that are showing, we don't have one for Irish here.
I think they are confusing the bulb with the beetroot. Maybe the way the structure looks like.
The way the structure looks like. Now, actually, when you cut through beetroot, it is a root. It doesn't have leaves at all. But the bulb has leaves. What we cut and we use for cooking is supposed to be the fresh leaves. But when you cut through this one here, the beetroot, it doesn't have leaves. It doesn't have the scale leaves that we are talking about. So it is different from the bulb, and it is also different from the Irish potato. They are not the same. So When you look at the screen there, we have a description of some of these terms here, that a bulb should have fleshy leaves that store food. It should have adventitious roots that are supposed to absorb water, and then it should have the buds that grow into a new plant. And we have given the example there of onion and garlic. We are actually still talking about the natural structures that are used for vegetative propagation. Then later on, we talked about the combs, which are also swollen to store food. They have buds that will grow into a new plant. And of course, certainly they should also get some adventitious roots. Remember, these are the ones that will give us adaptation. So if the question is, you're talking about describing structures used for vegetative propagation, and they tell you you give adaptations, how are they suited to do that work? You should be talking about what they have that ensures they can bring about vegetative propagation. So here we are saying the stem itself is swollen. That means food. It has buds that will grow into a new plant. And then the adventitious roots. It actually also has, I think, it has scale leaves as well. And we said the scale leaves are usually for protecting. So I'm basically trying to put across some of the things that we've been talking about here. So my friend who was talking about the stolon here, I hope you can see that a stolon is underground. On the surface, I usually see just a part of the leaves that grow above the ground, but the stem is underground. So just like any structures used for vegetative propagation, it must have a bud which will grow into a new plant. I think, Ruth, there are some people putting up their hand. Or any questions from the chat?
I think he should present his question while unmuted, because in the chat he had 2 questions. Rhea, please present your 2 questions. Please unmute. Okay. Okay.
What was her question in the chat?
Okay, I was asking, are the stolons the rhizomes? And then the second question is that, do stem tubers have lenticels? But that one, is it?
Lenticels are usually pores on the stem that can be used for gaseous exchange. They are small pores on the stem, and they use them for gaseous exchange. Now, given that stem tubers are underground, there is no way they would have the lenticels. I hope that question is answered. Then, are rhizomes the same as stolons? They are not exactly the same. If you're looking at a stolon, it is usually smaller, but all of them are actually horizontal stems, and they grow underground. The difference with the stolons are usually smaller in size. And because they are smaller in size, we put them under stolons. I don't know how many of us have seen couch grass. When you dig up underground, there is that white structure that has nodes and internodes like sugar cane, but you have got it from underground. That is what we are calling the couch grass, or even spear grass. They are the same. They are much, much smaller if you compare them to ginger. So the rhizomes are thicker, while the stolons are thinner. That is the major difference that they actually have. But the rest of the structures are the same. I don't know if I have any other questions or comments. What about bills? Bulbils, now that goes back to the bryophyllum. Those buds on the leaves, they can be called bulbils, especially when they're still smaller and younger. They call them bulbils or plantlets. Tashovia, I see your hand up. Do you have a comment or question?
If Tashovia prepares to give his comment or question in the chat, Imi is asking, and Mariana, that they are confused. Are stolons and bulbs the same? Like they're confused of the difference. I think because they have almost the same adaptations. So they're
No, the
asking for
adaptations, you
clarification.
find them actually, like I said at the beginning, actually that is the major bit that you should know about structures that we use for vegetative propagation. They should have bulbs. Sorry, they should have buds, all of them. They have to be swollen somehow, but I'm sure if you see the bulb, what is swollen on the bulb is the fleshy leaves. But we have not talked about leaves under stolons. I don't know if anyone has seen that statement. Stolons are underground. Even bulbs are underground. But the stolons, I said, are horizontal stems. They just grow horizontally on underground. And they become slightly thick, but they are not very thick. But if you look at an onion is actually very thick. And that is when we talk about the bulb. Tashovia, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, teacher. Is there a difference? Is there a functional difference between fibrous roots and adventitious roots?
Functional difference. All roots
Yes.
are supposed to absorb water and dissolve mineral salts. There's no functional difference. Maybe you're looking at their formation. That could be the difference. Adventitious roots usually grow from the seed, and they start from the same point, all of them, usually of the same size. When you plant your seed and it has a fibrous root system, they all grow at once. But when we get to adventitious roots, those are roots that grow on any other part of the plant, not growing mainly from the stem. Like all these roots that we are mentioning here, they are adventitious roots because they are growing off the stem. Is it Raya? Raya, please ask the question.
Yes, Raya, then teacher, I still need some help as you talk about the raisins and the stolons. As per
I don't know if we've lost you. Please come again. Ria, I think we lost you. Something?
Right, you're not unmuting. Okay, now you can. You can now unmute. Raya, please just type in the chat. Then Mwebaze.
I was just asking that why is sugarcane not considered an underground stem?
Maybe please come again.
why is a sugarcane not considered as an underground stem?
I don't know if any one of you has a response to that. Why is sugarcane not underground stem?
Let me answer. Sugarcane is not considered an underground stem because a sugarcane stem is always grows. I think even your question has the answer because its stem is not underground, it's above the ground. So that makes it that makes it be counted as not be counted as an underground stem.
That is very true. Just like the words are underground, that means on the above part of that particular plant. Above, I'm only seeing probably leaves and their stalk supporting them. But the rest of the structures, that is the stem and the roots, you find them underground. If I'm to see the stem, I must have uprooted it from the soil. So sugarcane, the stem is above, and because it is above the ground, we cannot call it an underground stem. So my friend was asking about runners. I am sharing something there about runners, that the runners, they also have auxiliary buds that will grow into the new plant. They have scale leaves. They have adventitious roots. But I hope you note here that we are not mentioning that they are swollen. But runners, like I said, they grow above the ground. They grow almost the same way as the stolon. The difference is the runner, the stem is above the ground, while the stolon, the stem is underground. Saka, I think that is what we talked about some time ago.
Teacher Silverlin.
Yes, please.
Sorry for interruption. In the chat, Trevor is asking, what about a carrot? Where does it lie?
Some of these things that I don't know if we were able to cover them sometime in senior 2, where you look at flowering plants, but I can give a brief. When we are looking at roots, roots have primary functions. They are supposed to absorb water from the soil, support the plant. But there are some roots that are modified to do some extra functions. And some of them have names. Like when we talk about the root tubers, what is special about the root tubers is they're usually swollen. Now, because they are swollen, they store food. And one of the root tubers that we have is carrot, then sweet potato. We also talked about beetroot. All those ones are root tubers. But when you're looking at root tubers, you can also differentiate them depending on which type of root where they have grown from. There are some root tubers that have grown from a taproot. Then there are those that grow from fibrous roots. Can someone give me a distinction? An example of one that has grown from a taproot and one that has grown from a fibrous root. Elijah, do you have a question or comment? Elijah, you can unmute.
Yes, thank you, madam. I am Nimugumia, so I was kindly requesting to ask about the difference between, the spotting difference that you can use to understand, like between a stem and a root, because it is being very hard for me to understand in terms of stolons, the suckers, differentiating them. How can you differentiate them, especially in root tubers? Thank you.
Now, there are structures that we talk about. For example, if there is anything that I'm going to call a stem, there are things it should have. A stem usually has leaves. Those leaves can be the normal green leaves that we see, or they could be the fleshy leaves like we see in bulbs, or they can be the scale leaves. So any stem must have leaves. Stems must have what we call buds, and they should also have what we call the nodes and internodes. Those are the characteristics. If I say identify this structure and you say it is a stem, and my next question is, why do you say it is a stem? What are the reasons that make it a stem? I would expect you to mention that it has leaves, it has buds, it has nodes and internodes. Now, those structures are usually not present in any root that you're talking about, apart from those few that are modified to do something extra. Any root will not have leaves as long as it is a root. And I've put it aside here and I'm saying it is a root. I don't expect it to have any leaves on it. Then a root will not have nodes and internodes. I'm very sure when you look at carrot and you look for nodes and internodes, you'll not see them. When you look at sweet potato and you're looking for nodes and internodes, you will not see them. So those ones are roots. But like I said, these structures can be modified, and when they are modified, they can serve the same function. So if you're looking at all those that are swollen, whether it is a swollen root tuber or a swollen stem, many times they have to store food. So that is usually maybe the confusion when we get them and for you think all of them contain food, therefore they should be the same type. That's the confusion, but I hope you can get the distinction between a root and a stem, depending on what you see there. When someone picks sugarcane, for example, you can easily see the nodes and you can see the internodes. You can also see some leaves, which you will not see on carrot, neither will you see them on beetroot, the root. Okay. I think I would refer you to do some revision from those old books, looking at types of stems, types of roots. Then you could be more conversant with some of these statements here. Because for us here, the reason why you're seeing their similarities, because our emphasis is to find out if I have a bulb, another one has a comb, why am I able to use them for vegetative propagation? So we are picking out things that are almost similar, but the structures are different. Is it Rovin? Please ask your question.
Yes, teacher. Accordingly, from the bulb comb, stolon runners and suckers, we're having something in common. Yes, we like with the vegetative propagation, the buds are for development. But then it's something in common. It's like they're all having adventitious roots. Is it something in common or?
Yes, it is also in common because if this plant is to grow, it will need water. So where does that water come from? It has to be absorbed from underground. So that is why they usually have adventitious roots.
Teacher, but excuse me, teacher.
Yes.
Can't any kinds of roots be used like for, of course, like the primary function we have that of transportation of water and mineral salts. So I thought maybe my question is why not any other kind of roots, but then the adventitious roots?
Now, if you're looking at a taproot, for example, it should be growing. The people writing, please, and me stop it. Those writing on the screen.
If you're writing on the screen, you're going to be removed from the meeting immediately.
We have
Please
what we
stop
call
it.
taproot. Can someone tell me what they know about a taproot system?
Arthur, your hand is up.
Okay, like a taproot. A taproot is, there are types of roots with something like, they have a main root, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah, they have a main root and others branching from the main root. I think that's what they call a taproot system.
Please take note that the roots that grow from other structures of the plant, other than growing direct from the seed that you have planted, we usually call them adventitious roots. So when I find them on a bulb, I can't call them a taproot, they are adventitious roots. When I find them on a comb, they can't be a taproot. Usually, for me to get fibrous roots or taproot system, I should plant a seed. When you plant that seed, it has a radicle. Now, if that radical grows into one main root and some side roots, then I'll say this one has a taproot system. Now, if I plant a seed and the radicle of that seed becomes fibrous roots, very many roots of the same size, originating from the same point, then I will call them fibrous roots. But the structures that we are talking about here are not seeds. So the roots that grow on them, we can't call them taproots, neither can we call them fibrous roots. We can only address them as adventitious roots. I don't know if that question is answered.
Irvin, your hand is up.
Okay, I was looking at Elijah putting up the hand. I don't know why it is now off, but we can, I think, continue. Now, I said also that when you look at all these ones that I have put down here, all these ones are stems, but they are modified stems. They are not the usual stem. It grows above the ground, then it has leaves and so on. Many of them are modified. Now, modification means the structure grows something special for it to be able to serve a particular function. Like I said, the bulb, they have leaves that are fleshy in order to store food. When you go to the comb, the stem itself is swollen. When you go to the stolon, it has the buds that will grow into a new plant. Then the runners, what is special about them? They also have buds. I said the difference between a runner and a stolon, one is underground, another one you find it above the ground. Then suckers, you have a parent plant, but on the side, a smaller plant grows. And that smaller plant grows from what we call the axillary bud. But the rest of our structures, like I said, would be almost the same. I think for more emphasis and avoiding probably some of the confusion, you need to look at types of stems. If you look at stems, there are those that we call erect stems and aerial stems. Aerial stems, those are stems that have grown above the ground. Then there are those that remain in the soil. And I said, how do you identify a stem regardless of the fact that you have picked it from the soil? It should have buds, which you don't find on many roots. It should have nodes and internodes, which you will not find on roots. I hope we are together. Ruth, do we have any questions?
In
Whoever
the
said
chat,
pardon, I don't know pardon on what.
I really don't know. Mwebaze, she has raised her hand.
Okay.
In the chat, Galaxy saying, so which means rhizomes, combs, stem tubers, bulbs are underground stems?
Exactly. All those ones are underground stems.
Okay, and then Ricky. Ricky, unmute. Mwelaze, please first. You can
Teacher, I
raise any
was
question.
requesting that you repeat the last statement, please.
Where was the last statement on?
The modification of stems.
Now, I said these stems, you find some of them swollen. Now, the part which is swollen is also important because for the bulb, I don't expect you to say the stem is swollen because actually it is not the stem which is swollen, but it has fleshy leaves which store food. And I said when you go to the comb, it is now the stem itself which is swollen in order for it to store food. Then, if you look at all of them, they have buds because it is the bud that will grow into a new plant. Then some of them have scale leaves. Maybe I can also talk about scale leaves. When you get the onion, that paper-like structure that we remove from the onion before we cut it to use it to make food is what we call the scale leaf. And that scale leaf is supposed to protect the inner parts or protecting the stem from drying up. So those are some of the modifications. And the modifications are supposed to ensure that this structure can do something different from what the rest are expected to do. Someone said aerial stems and underground. Yes, that is the first division of stems. We divide them into aerial and then underground. Aerial, that means when I look outside, I should be able to see it. Then underground, if I'm to see the stem, I must dig it up. Now, when we get into the underground stems, that is now where I go into the different types: bulbs, combs, stolons, rhizomes, sulcus, all those ones are fall under underground stems. Alex, your hand is up.
Hey, teacher, if you don't mind, I request we proceed with the next slide because we're remaining with just 35 minutes. The rest can keep typing in their questions in the chat so that when the time has run out, you'll be able to answer. Is it okay?
Now, what we have there, or what we've been discussing previously, are the forms of natural. And we said we are also having what we call the artificial means of vegetative propagation. You're still using a plant structure in order to get a new one other than the seed. The pictures that we have on the screen there, I don't know if any of us have practiced some of them. I don't know if we can identify them. What are the farmers in there doing? Now, this is where man is actually participating. You want to plant something and you're not using the seed. So it is not a natural thing that is existing, but you're applying artificial methods. My cursor is on the very first picture here. Can I get someone to identify it?
Who? Josh, Mwelaze, as well as Linda, are calling it grafting. Then, okay, if I've asked you to unmute, please first introduce yourself. Galaxy Note, your name, please, and then you can contribute.
My name is S.4. I think that is crafting because the union of Cambian layers of the two wooden stems, like that is, okay, it is crafting, according to me.
According to you, seeing crafting. Okay.
So that's the feedback that has been sent in.
Okay. Can someone briefly tell us what happens in grafting? What exactly is the farmer doing in order for us to say that this farmer has carried out grafting? Yes, Mwebaze.
So I think the farmer has gotten a stem and cut out some piece. He has got a stalk and cut out the middle part that we call, for the stem, that we call sanyon, something like that.
That's called.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but it is S-C-I-O.
Well, as they are muted, please unmute. Okay, maybe you.
So I think the farmer has gotten us that stem stalk and cut out that middle sanyon. Yeah, that's what I think.
S.4, your hand is up too.
To me, crafting is made by collecting the parts of the plant that is to be propagated. Like the base of a scion is cut to a wedge-shaped point, and then the cut is also made into a seedling. That is all I know.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, usually when you're looking at artificial methods, a farmer has something that they have interest in. They have seen a particular plant and it is producing something good. Maybe the fruit is good, maybe it can stay for long, maybe it matures fast. So there's a characteristic that they are looking for in a particular plant and they want to carry it forward to the next generation. And of course, they use different methods. So the very first one that we are seeing here is grafting, like all of us mentioned. Now for grafting, you must identify what we call a stalk. A stalk is the one that is still in the soil. You cut off the upper part and you remain with the lower part of the stem. It should have the roots and then maybe a short part of the stem remaining. That is what they call a stalk. Then from another plant that you want to put these two together in order to improve something, you want a better fruit or you want it to mature faster or something, you bring it and you insert it in, as we see from this picture, what the person is doing. So the first this lower part that we are seeing is what they call a stalk. It must be in the soil, able to absorb water. Then the part that you're going to attach is what they call a scion, like my friend said, it is S-I. It is supposed to be S-C-I-O-N. That is what they call a scion. So you cut it and then you insert it in the other and you tie them together, what we see on the lower picture. So here you have cut something that you want to fit in this. So this one is your stalk. while this one is your scion that you're going to attach. And when you have fixed them together, you tie either using banana fibers or any material that is available. You attach them together, and then this one will grow. The reason they are doing this, they want to improve something. I don't know, it is usually done when they are propagating fruits like oranges. Some of us have seen those big oranges, very juicy, which you may not find in the normal way of growing the oranges. So one of the ways that they can improve the quality of an orange is by carrying out grafting. You identify one that has very good fruits, and then you identify another that probably can grow very fast, and then you put them together. It's important to note that they should be in the same type of, same species. I can't get a mango and I want to graft it with an avocado. They should be in the same category, if I may put it like that. So that is what grafting is about. You must have a stalk, which is the plant that is remaining in the soil. You cut it off and then you make a shape in order to fix in the other one that you're bringing from another plant, and you tie them together. That is grafting. It is very common for people that are doing fruits and they want to get better fruits that grow faster. Now, if you look at my second picture here, maybe I'll get questions later on. This second picture, can we identify the type of artificial vegetative propagation? What is happening there? I think someone said here, what is a condition for grafting? I have already mentioned one of them, that the plants that you're combining should be in the same category. You can't get a mango and you put an onion or something like that. If I'm looking at, it should be oranges that I'm dealing with, or combining it with lemon, or different forms of mangoes that I'm bringing together. I think we know that there are different types of mangoes, but as long as all of them are mangoes, those ones can be grafted together. Someone is calling it malcoating. Yeah. Actually, this is called layering, not malcoating. Lovin?
Teacher, can't it be cutting?
The second picture, it's not cutting. This one is called layering. In my pictures, I'm not showing actually cutting, but it's another artificial method when you talk about stem cutting, just like the way people propagate cassava. You simply get the stem and you cut the stem, then you plant. So that one is stem cutting. But in this case, what they are doing, if you look at the picture well, they are getting a stem and then connect that stem to the ground. They use what they call pegs. And that stem begins to grow. They make some small cuttings there. Then the stem begins to grow roots. Now, once the roots have grown, I cut it off from the main plant. So that means it is no longer going to depend on this main plant, but it has begun its own life now. And they call that layering. So you get a stem branch, you make it come into contact with the soil. I said you can use a peg or something that can make sure that it's remaining in the soil. Usually they can put some chemicals that stimulate the development of roots, or they can make some cuttings. And once this stem is into contact with soil with good conditions, it begins to grow roots. And once the roots have grown, then they cut off the branch from the main plant. And this one begins its own life. So that is what they call layering. Then in the picture here, where we have tissue culture or plant tissue culture, that is also another method where you get any part of the plant, usually small parts, maybe you cut them on the leaves or you cut them on the stalk or somewhere, and you take it to the laboratory, provide suitable conditions for it to grow. And this one is actually very good for producing crops that are germ-free. They don't have any disease. This is one of the things that the farmers do. I don't know how many of us know about narrow that deals with matoke. They can just cut a piece of the matoke, cut it into smaller pieces, then take it to the lab and provide it with culture solutions where all the minerals are provided. What the plant would need to get from the soil is provided in the laboratory. Then they allow it to go through stages of development until when they can get smaller plants from it, just like we see from the last picture here, and then they can now transfer these to the garden and plant them. So just like the word is, you get a tissue. A tissue is supposed to be a group of cells. You can either get it from the leaves, you can get it from the stem, or any part of a plant. And that tissue that you have cut, you take it to the lab and allow it to go through stages of development until you get a smaller plantlet out of it. Then that plant can be transferred. It's one of the things that is now done in agriculture. Ruth, I'm back to you for any questions.
Yes, in the chat, Maria is asking, doesn't plant tissue culture change the genetic material of the plant?
It doesn't change the genetic material because when you see, I'm talking about one plant, I can cut it from one plant. It means I have not mixed it with any other plant. You can only change the genetic makeup if you have mixed. You get one plant from another, then you bring another and you put them together. Then you can change the genetic makeup. Like when cross-pollination occurs, there you expect the genetic makeup to change. But here, the genetic makeup remains the same. I don't know if we have heard about cloning. You get exactly the same type as the parent because the genes have not mixed at all.
Okay, thank you, teacher. And Safra, your hand has been up for some time. So from Safra, we'll listen also from Ravin.
Sure, about layering. Do we have some plants that layer naturally, like either by rooting from the tips of etching shoots or by means of runners? Can I please know the examples of those plants that layer naturally?
Now, layering is not natural. That's why you see I'm talking about it under artificial. But runners usually grow just like the same way something that is close to layering, because as long as the node comes into contact with the soil, it will grow naturally. But here, man has to participate. You see, I have said this is common for people that plant rose, and there's another flower that they call bougainvillea. You just get the stem and attach it to the soil, meaning that you're participating as man. So it becomes artificial and not natural.
Okay, thank you, teacher. And then in the chat, before I go to those whose hands are up, from Maria, Matthias also asked that, teacher, can you combine, is it a must to combine 2 plants only, or you can also combine 3?
For grafting, it's a must that you deal with 2. They don't deal with more than 2.
Then still on grafting, Linda is asking what happens when you don't make clean cuts in grafting.
Of course, that means they would be sick. And since you have cut, it might be very hard for them to undergo proper development if they are not clean. So it's very important that when you cut them, they are clean to avoid transfer of germs that would affect the growth.
Thank you for that one. And then, okay, from the chat, Douglas is asking, so you mean you can get a banana plantation from small banana leaves cut by by plant tissue culture?
Exactly. That's very true. You just get a tissue, but you just can't do it at your home. You have to go and do it in the laboratory, because I said that when you cut those small tissues, you must provide them with a suitable environment for them to grow. And in the suitable environment, usually they prepare a solution where they have put all the chemicals that the plant or all the minerals and nutrients that the plant would actually have got from the soil. They make sure that it is present in that solution. And then because it is delicate, it should be in the lab setting where you avoid entry of germs and any other interference. So I can't say you can do this at home. It has to be done in the laboratory. But when they get that small tissue, it can give you a whole new plant that is complete.
Okay. From Valentine is asking, teacher, do they cut the buds or pieces of leaves?
Now, for tissue culture, it can be any part. You can cut the buds, you can cut the leaf, you can cut from the stem, anything. By the way, biologically, they say any cell that is got from an organism is capable of growing into that organism if given proper conditions. So you can cut the bud, you can cut the part of the stem, you can cut from the leaf, and then give it the suitable conditions, and then it will give you a new plant. Or new plants, actually, depending on how many you have cut.
Okay, probably a second last question because of time. Linda is asking, should the scion be dormant?
None of them should be dormant because it should grow. Dormant means it's not growing, isn't it? So the stem and the scion should be in position to grow. When you put them together and you tie them, growth should continue. If one is dormant, then you don't expect to get a new plant from that set.
The questions are many and our time is fast spent. Let me ask 3 of them at once so that Robin can also ask a question. Rose Jolie is asking, is tissue culture also called cloning? Chalam is asking, on grafting, is it a must that you use an old stem? Then JB, what are some of the examples of plants these artificial methods can be? Of plants on whom these artificial methods, I think, can be used.
So if my
Yes, those are the 3 questions.
The person can get to the screen. We have the examples like stem or cuttings generally. You can cut the stem, but of course the most common one is stem cutting, where they use for cassava. You cut the stem into smaller pieces, then you plant them. Not very small though, and you plant them. Then we talked about grafting. Grafting, I gave you examples, oranges, mangoes. That is why it has been very common. Layering, they are mentioning here, blackberries, but I also gave you examples of those flowers, like rose flowers. There's one called bougainvillea, exactly. It can be done. Then micropropagation, which is the same as tissue culture. I gave you examples of bananas. That's why it has been done. Even in Uganda, I don't know how many of us know about Namulonge here in Gayaza. That's why they do a lot of these things of tissue culture.
Did you get the previous question?
I think there's a first one that I'm forgetting.
That is tissue culture the same as cloning?
Okay. Now cloning is much bigger, but tissue culture is an example of cloning, because cloning can even be done in animals. You just get a portion of that animal and make an exact copy of it. That is what they say cloning is. So tissue culture is an example of cloning, but cloning is much bigger because it doesn't only apply to plants.
And then from JB, he was, we answered JB. Chelam was asking, is it a must that in grafting you have to use an old stem?
Now, usually the stem, which we are calling the stalk, should be not very old, but mature enough for it to absorb water and mineral salts. Because remember, what I'm going to insert in there, I have removed the roots, and I'm just having the top part, maybe just a bud or maybe a shoot without any root system. So that means if you use something young, which is also not able to support itself, the grafting may not continue. So it should not be very old, but should also not be very young. It should be of relative age, depending on which plants you're grafting.
Robin, please unmute and ask.
Okay, thank you, teacher. I have two questions. One, like, teacher, you talked of, like, with grafting, that you cannot have avocado grafted with mangoes. But I remember, I don't know if I was just sarcastic or that teacher just gave it to us wrongly, that you can ever get oranges, you graft them with mangoes, with avocado, and then you still get out the same thing. So I request, if there is any other method that we can do that, please, I request for your help. Then even teach another thing with artificial methods of propagation. You mean it's okay for one to use those methods, not following the plant having a bud? I don't know if I'm good.
That's it. So the first one, like when you're dealing with grafting, I said it is usually done when you're dealing with organisms or plants that are within the same category. For example, I get different types of oranges, I can graft them together. Different mangoes, maybe one has a big fruit, another matures very fast, and I want to bring those two good characteristics together. I can do grafting. I have not got one where they are planting a mango and an avocado. I don't know which kind of fruit will come through in that case. But maybe research can take us through that. Now, these methods, of course, there are things that you should be looking out for. Like when they're cutting the stem of, cassava. The stem has buds on it. Some of them are usually younger, but those buds can be planted. The stem can be planted and then the buds grow out to become a new plant. Now, grafting, like I said, you have a stalk which has a root, and then you have the other part, which can be a bud or it can be a shoot with some leaves on it. Or you can cut off the leaves and you're putting, not necessarily that it must have buds. Even layering, you don't have to have buds. I said you just get a branch. That branch, you get it off from the main, you don't remove it from the main tree, but rather when still connected to the main tree, you allow it to touch the soil or touch the ground. Now that part which is touching the ground will grow into, it will begin to grow roots. And then later on, when I cut it from the main plant, it gives me a new plant. So these methods are done the way we are describing them here. Tissue culture, I've said you can cut any part, any tissue, and then you grow it in the lab. Then later on, it gives you plants that you can now transfer to the garden. There's this budding. Now for budding strictly, you should be cutting off the buds. It is very common when you're dealing with Irish potato. People cut that Irish potato into different portions, but each portion must have a bud on it. And then you plant that bud. That is now when we talk about budding. So budding strictly requires buds. Ruth, I don't know if we have any comments.
Yes, people have already gone, Linda's already gone to marketing, but she's asking what is sphagnum moss gado as used in marketing and colors in marketing. Have you got me?
Mm-hmm. Now, coating is almost similar to layering, but for coating, you don't have to attach it to the soil. It's a matter of me identifying a stem. When you identify the stem, you cut off the back. Now, when you cut off the back, I hope we know what the back is. You can put any materials. I think those are some of the materials that she was mentioning. And those materials that you're using, you want to stimulate the growth of roots. So it is, coating is almost similar to layering, but the only difference is layering, I should get the stem into contact with the soil. Coating, I simply identify my stem. I don't know how many of us have ever seen where they make back cloth. But when they're making back cloth, they remove the bark of that mutuva tree and then put their banana leaves to protect it such that a new bark can grow. But in this case, you don't want a new bark to grow, but you rather want roots to grow from that point that you have made. So they put chemicals that will stimulate the growth of roots on that point. Then a new plant can grow in that kind of form that we are calling coating.
Zadan, your hand is up. Zadan, please unmute.
Excuse me, teacher. Excuse me, teacher.
Yes, please.
Teacher, how do you get the stem to touch the ground when it's still on the plant?
It's not the actual stem, but a branch of the stem. And we said you have to use like a peg. There are some, just like you hold the clothes on the line. So even here, you need structures to support this stem in the ground, this branch of the stem in the ground. So you force it to bend and it touches the soil. Once you have done that, you're not going to remain there holding it in that position, but you either use other trees to support it so that it can remain in that position. Just like we see in this picture here.
Oh, okay, teacher. Thank you,
So we are
teacher.
putting here support. That means you're
Yes.
bending, but there's something that is supposed to hold it in that bent position.
Okay. From the chat, Mariana is asking, what are meristems?
I don't know if all of us have been able to study that topic of growth. I don't know if it comes a bit later, but when we are looking at plants, they have regions that undergo growth. They are not like human beings or animals where you expect that any part of your body can grow. For plants, it is specific areas that grow. Now, those areas that grow have what we call regions of cell division, where cell division happens. If an organism is to grow, the original cells keep dividing to form new ones, then the new ones also divide to form others like that. Now, for plants, it is usually at the tip of the stem and at the tip of the root that we have cells that continuously divide. Now, those points where there's cell division in the root or the shoot is what we call the meristem. I don't know if my friend, I have tried to answer that question, but if you've done growth, that is something that you should look at. At the tip of the root and at the tip of the shoot, there are points that we call meristems. Why are they called meristems? They have cells that continuously divide. Other parts of the plant, their cells don't divide. So it is only those points where cell division occurs, and we call them meristems. So this one is also similar to, how do you call that? Tissue culture. Now, instead of cutting anywhere else for meristems, they will cut the tip of the shoot or the tip of the root. When they cut it, they take it to the lab and provide it with suitable conditions, and it will begin to grow. And when it grows, it can give you a new plant. Now, because you've not mixed one plant and another, that is why we are still calling it vegetative propagation. The outcome is exactly similar to the parent plant. Then, of course, we have this last one, which is apomicity, where you have seeds growing without fertilization happening. I think we have also heard of those fruits, the growth of fruits without fertilization. It is common in banana and this plant here. Ruth, I don't know if we have any other questions, because the next one that we should be talking about is comparing these things of vegetative propagation, but I think that will happen in your next lesson.
And the questions are still coming in because one was from Safra. Safra was asking how is the branch cut when sphagnum has grown?
How is the branch cut when
sphagnum has grown?
Now you just need to cut at any point. I hope it is just like you look at this particular drawing here for layering. Someone will come and cut from that point. And once they cut from that point, that means this one has been separated from the main plant, and therefore it is beginning its own life. So you can cut accordingly depending on where you tied or where roots have grown from.
Okay, and lastly from Bree. Okay. Bree is asking, from a diseased plant, if a meristem is planted, does it mean, good, the question, does it mean it will be disease-free according to teacher's explanation on the screen?
It will be disease-free. Just like what we said about tissue culture. But of course, like any good farmer, you wouldn't go and pick something that already has a disease. You would pick where it is still healthy, and that is what you deal with. That means the outcome will not have a disease. So tissue culture and meristem culture, they give you new plants that are usually disease-free.
Okay. Those
I
were
want
the
to
questions
appreciate
in
you,
the
Ruth.
chat.
Thank you for the support, Ruth, that you have given. And then the rest of you, thank you for participating in the lesson. Usually the work becomes simpler when we do more research. I'm sure we know that this curriculum requires that you, when you come across something that seems to be new and a bit disturbing, you research more about it. I'm sure you get more enlightened. So I think we can close our lesson for today. Can have a blessed evening.
Okay. Thank you so much, teacher. Silverlyn, a new teacher, I had not yet heard of you. Jaden, your hand is up. I hope you want to pray for us. If you have a question, kindly leave your hand up. Okay. Jaden, if you have a question, please ask, and then we'll have someone to lead us in a prayer. Sorry, please unmute again.
Is there a lesson tomorrow?
There is no lesson. There's no lesson tomorrow.
Oh.
It's Monday to Friday.
Thank you, teacher.
Okay.
Okay.
The notes will be sent, Bathsheba, they will be sent in the group. So I hope Anisha would love to lead us in a prayer as well.
Okay, are you hearing?
Yes.
Okay, loving Father, we thank you for this precious day. We thank you that we have had one of my best subjects, Lord Jesus. Lord, as we're going for our weekend, Lord Father, please help us enjoy responsibly, Lord Jesus. And whatever we have learned, Lord Father, let us remember it, Father. We pray for our teacher, Lord Father. We thank her and we thank you for blessing her with such a wonderful wisdom and understanding, Lord, that she has given to us. Pray for all that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay. Have a blessed weekend and God bless you all.